Disney's Cruella, a novelization. Prologue. Cruella de Vil wasn't born. She was made. Although, if we are being technical, she was, in truth, like any living, breathing being, born. Her name was Estella, and it is rumored that on the night of her birth, the stars didn't shine, and the moon dared not peek out from behind the stormy clouds. Some say that wolves howled, and others say the rivers around her home ran hot. But people say a lot of things. And a lot of the time, those things are not true. At least, not all of them. Estella came into the world like any other baby, kicking and screaming, but from the moment she arrived, it was clear that she was not like any other baby. Unique, some called her. Special, said others. A few kinder souls who came across her rolling along in her pram might have even dared call her cute, until her knit cap fell off, revealing her hair. Jet black on one side, pure white on the other. It was, from the moment she was born, thick and distinct, and when people saw it, they usually stopped thinking cute and started thinking bizarre. But mothers are blinded by love, and Estella's mother, Catherine, was no exception. To Catherine, Estella was perfect and brilliant from the moment she entered the world. As the days and years passed, Estella grew from a curious baby who was quick to smile to a precocious toddler who insisted on doing everything on her own. She walked before other children her age, and by 2 was having full conversations with her mum. She never seemed to notice the strange looks people gave her, and never seemed bothered that no one came to visit the shabby but cozy cottage where she and her mother lived. To Estella, her tiny home wasn't drab or sad. The clothes her seamstress mother mended brightened the small space and became her world. She slipped silk, chiffon, and taffeta through her fingers, marveling at their smoothness. She compared clothes and dreamed up patterns. As Estella grew older, other talents began to shine through. At her mother's knee, Estella quickly learned how to thread a needle and soon was darning socks and hemming skirts. When the meager furniture at home became too threadbare, Estella would create colorful patches out of fabric remnants. While sewing came naturally to Estella, following the rules was a bit harder for her. On more than one occasion, Estella's mother had to give her a gentle reminder. "You must follow the pattern," she said to her daughter. "There's a way to do things." "It's ugly," Estella said, holding up a pattern and comparing its straight lines to the one she had imagined for her doll's new dress. Her mother shook her head. "That's cruel. Your name is Estella, not Cruella." Cruella was the nickname her mother had given her when she was younger, and in the throes of the terrible 2s, which were followed by the tyrannical 3s. Estella's temper, when it got the best of her, can make her quite cranky, and sometimes even mean. Her mother liked to remind her to keep Cruella in check, though some moments were easier than others. Sometimes, at the reminder, young Estella shook her head or, if in a particularly pouty mood, ripped up a pattern or stomped her feet. But she always returned to give her mother a hug and a sorry. She didn't want to be cruel. She just wanted to sew. By the time she was 12 years old, Estella was a talented seamstress. While she still didn't have many friends, her mother told her every day she was special. "You can be anybody or anything you want, sweet girl," her mom said. "You aren't just black or white. You're every color of the rainbow." And Estella believed her. Estella didn't need friends. She had her mom and her imagination. So for the most part, Estella was happy. But all that was about to change. Chapter 1. 12-year-old Estella sat astride her bicycle and stared up at the huge stone building in front of her that exuded wealth and privilege. The day she had been waiting for, well, forever, was finally here. She was going to start at a fancy private school, and while she was a little excited, she was also a lot terrified. Estella stared up at the building, absently rubbing the lining of her jacket, comforted by the feel of the fabric. She smiled. Maybe the school was like her jacket. It looked one way on the outside, but was something entirely different on the inside. She sighed. She doubted it. Kids began to stream into the courtyard seemingly from all directions, their uniforms immaculate and pressed perfectly. A row of fancy cars lined up, waiting to drop off more students. She heard shrieks of laughter as girls who hadn't seen each other over the holiday were reunited, and the deeper voices of the boys as they made their own, more reserved greetings. It all sounded like a foreign language to Estella. She turned and looked at her mother, who was perched on a bicycle beside her. The woman's graying hair seemed to be forever attempting to escape its tilting bun, and the doll smock she wore was perpetually stained. She looked nothing like the women waving goodbye to their children from the windows of their cars. Every hair on those women's heads was perfectly smooth. Their makeup was flawless, and not a button was out of place. An unfamiliar sensation washed over Estella. Looking at her mother, she was almost embarrassed. "Remember," her mother said, interrupting Estella's thoughts, "you belong here as much as anybody." Shame immediately washed over Estella. There she was, feeling self-conscious about her mother, when all her mother had done for years was scrimp and save so that Estella could go to this silly school. Taking a deep breath, Estella loosened her grip on the handlebars of her bike. She might not have gone to school with these kids before, but she wasn't going to let them bring her down. Or at least, she wasn't going to let her mother think they were getting to her. "Agreed," she said. Her confident tone belied the doubt she was feeling. Her mum nodded. "And what do you say to Cruella when she tries to get the better of you?" Estella sighed. She hated that her mum still used that nickname for her slightly wicked side, but her mum wasn't wrong to remind her. She had to hold tight to her temper. "Thank you for coming, but you may go now," she recited dutifully. Pleased by the answer, her mum gave her a small smile. Then she looked back and forth between the big, imposing building and Estella, her eyes distant. Estella wondered where her mother's thoughts had gone. There was something haunted and deeply sad in her expression. Estella turned and looked at a group of girls in their matching uniforms, with hats tipped jauntily on their heads. She wore the same plain, ugly jacket and matching skirt they did, with a few small tweaks her mom didn't know about, of course. But she wasn't wearing the hat. Ever. Taking a deep breath, Estella said one more goodbye to her mom, parked her bicycle in one of the racks, and joined the stream of students entering the school. When she reached the top of the steps, she turned around. Her mom was still there, watching. Estella gave her another wave, and then turned and entered the building. As soon as she was out of sight of her mom, Estella took her jacket off. Flipping it inside out, she smiled. The drab and itchy blue plaid was replaced by silk Estella had dyed a vibrant yellow. It was loud and jarring. It was perfect. Estella put the jacket back on and ran a hand through her hair. A surge of confidence rushed through her. She always felt better when rocking her own designs. Ignoring the looks of the other students, some of whom had stopped and were blatantly staring, mouths open, Estella began to weave a path through the hallway. Even in the dim lighting, the jacket shone. Estella was proud of herself. She had spent hours, late at night, creating it. She had worked to blend the perfect dye and collect the silk piece by small piece from her mom's sewing jobs so she wouldn't know. The result was something unique and utterly her. Of course, that didn't mean everyone would understand. The other students weren't used to anyone stepping out of line. You wore the uniforms and followed the rules. But Estella had never been particularly great at following the rules. Suddenly, two boys stepped in front of Estella. Stopping, she looked up at them, her face impassive. One of the boys had a mop of ginger hair and a mean expression. The other had cruel-looking eyes to go with his own equally unpleasant expression. Estella's mother had raised her to be kind, always. So Estella did what she figured any nice person would do. She introduced herself. "Hi," she said warmly. "My name's Estella. I'm new here and looking forward to getting acquainted." The boys didn't say anything for a long, tense moment. Then the ginger-haired boy spoke. "Look," he said. "A skunk has got loose in the building." Estella's eyes narrowed. How dare he call her a name? He didn't even know her. She felt a small ball of rage form as Cruella pushed to be free. Ignore them. Turning, Estella saw a girl about her age standing nearby. She wore the same uniform, but Estella couldn't help noticing the flash of collar under the dress shirt. Perhaps there was someone else at this place with a little fashion sense. Estella gave her a grateful smile. "Of course," Estella said, turning her back on the boys. "I'm sure I'll win them over. I'm Estella." "Anita," the girl answered with a grin. Just then something wet and hard hit Estella's cheek. Lifting her hand, she found a spitball plastered to the side of her face. She saw the ginger-haired boy and his sidekick laughing. She blinked rapidly, fighting off tears. Okay, so maybe it was going to take a little longer to win them over. As the day wore on, it seemed like no matter how hard Estella tried, the other kids were intent on making her first day of school her last. In the hallway there were more spitballs. When she opened her locker, she found it full of garbage. No matter where she went, she heard kids giggling and whispering, and even one time caught a student blatantly pointing at her. She had thought her yellow jacket would be her armor, but soon enough it just made her feel like she stood out. In a bad way. After lunch, a wholly dreadful experience, Estella sat in the back of a classroom. Her eyes were glued to the clock on the front wall as it slowly ticked by the minutes. All around her she heard snickering. Suddenly she noticed the boy from earlier, the one with the red hair, sneaking into the classroom. He was late, which wasn't surprising, as Mean Ginger seemed the sort of boy who couldn't be bothered to show up on time to class. And he had an evil look in his eye. This was also not surprising. He crept up behind the teacher. She was writing notes on the board and didn't notice as the boy carefully pulled her chair back a few inches. It wasn't much, but it was just enough that when the teacher turned to sit, she would likely fall. It was one thing for the mean boy to pick on Estella, but she couldn't let him humiliate a teacher too. Estella got to her feet, walked down the space between the desks, and reached for the chair. Unfortunately, before Estella could move the chair, the teacher turned to sit and fell flat on her backside. The classroom erupted in laughter. "This is not how it looks," Estella said, holding up her hands innocently. From the floor, the teacher glared at her. I, Estella started to protest, but it was no use. The teacher pointed to the door. Estella walked out, her head high. But as soon as the classroom door shut behind her, Estella let out a trembling breath. Tears welled in her eyes. It was only her first day, and she was on the way to the headmaster's office. She was a charity case, a scholarship student. "Your behavior must be impeccable," her mother had reminded her just that morning. Enough blots on the record book, and she could lose her place at the school. And now she had just gotten her first blot. This was supposed to be an amazing day, but now Estella just wanted it to be over.